see, is Helen, I think Helen's our other presenter today.
It's Caitlin is today. Helen is going to be here tomorrow.
Okay. So Helen's tomorrow. Hi, Caitlin. I think that you all should have the screen sharing abilities then. If everyone else wants to shut off their screens, we'll go ahead and hear from this group, and I'll just be taking notes in the background.
Hey, Jay, if I could interject for 1 minute. I had a lot of fun playing with trying to find a way to make things a little different for this. And I don't think it worked quite as well as I had hoped when I did my little 3-minute introduction at the beginning. Because we're doing the soil health thing, I have a cutout of soil in the background there. An eroded bank. I don't know if you can recognize what soil types might be there, but I've got a trowel here and I'm digging into this bank and bringing soil out of the bank.
Look how clever he is.
And that was what I did this morning, but I don't think a lot of people picked up on what it was I was actually doing. So I wanted to do a reprise.
I'm very impressed. We're gonna really have to up our game, Jay.
Yeah,
that's what you can do with a green screen.
I like it.
So,
I'm jealous of that background, but I honestly don't know if that's a Wyoming soil. I have to tell you.
You might be right. Well, actually, the soil that was in that I just poured in front of you was definitely Wyoming soil because it came from the back.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure. All right. Well, my name's Jay Norton. I'm a professor and soil science extension specialist at University of Wyoming. And I want to just say a couple words, and then I'm going to hand it off to Caitlin Youngquist. The purpose is to just start a conversation about what a Wyoming soil health initiative would look like. And we're going to have a workshop tomorrow and be joined by Helen Silver from the Colorado Collaborative for Healthy Soils. That's a group that's like a year ahead of us. They're just getting started. But right now, Caitlin Youngquist is a extension educator that's working in Worland, and she has a PhD in soil science and is an expert on soil health and composting. So she's going to give us a little background on the concept of soil health, and then I'll talk about the soil health initiative.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate the invitation to share with you all a little bit, and I think that I will not be available tomorrow, unfortunately, to join that discussion, but I think it's a really important one, and I look forward to hearing what you all come up with. But in order to facilitate that, I think it's helpful to have some common definitions and a common understanding about what soil health is, or what healthy soils, what that term means. And I know it's been, we've been getting a lot more talk about soil health in the popular press and in the media, which I think is a great thing. So I'm just going to you a little bit about sort of the high level view of what soil health means. And then we can start with the definition of health. So we're talking about soil health, but the same could be said for livestock health, human health, right? And the definition of health, one of the definitions is the capacity to function, which we want high functioning soils, and also the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of challenges. So if we think, again, if we extrapolate this from just the general concept of health for livestock or people or soil, and think more specifically about soil health and the capacity to function as a soil, we're looking at the idea of plant, animal, and human health as tied to soil health. Biological productivity, this is particularly important if you're farming or gardening or growing something in the soil. And then environmental quality, so water quality, air quality, all of this also into healthy soils. We can also think about resiliency, right? The ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of challenges. So we want a resilient soil system, particularly resilient to stressors like drought, compaction, erosion, disease, all of these things that are going to be important if we're, again, trying to grow food in healthy soil. So having a really resilient, healthy system can make a big difference. And there are a few ways to think about the soil system. And again, remembering that the soil really is a system, right? And we're looking at biological, chemical, and physical components of the soil, right? When we think about maybe larger scale conventional agriculture, we're talking about taking a soil test and applying fertilizer. We're looking at the chemistry of the soil mostly, right? When we look at what type of implement to pull through the field, if we're going to use a rototiller, if we're going to use a plow, if we're going to use a disc, what in terms of the physical working of the soil, that's another component. And then we have the biological component, which we're still learning a lot about. It's a fascinating part of the soil. It's really what makes it a living system. And it's very, very important. We've been good at this part for a long time, right? In more sort of modern agriculture, balancing the chemistry, read a soil test and put on the fertilizer that matches the soil test, what type of iron to pull through the field. So we've been doing that for a long time and we get stuck there, I think. And when we pull in the biological component, that's where the magic really happens. That's where we get a really healthy, functioning, thriving system. So when we think about soil health, remember there's those three components that are all really important. And the biological system historically has been left out, I think, in terms of soil management. So when it comes to soil health, we're pulling that biological component back in again. And again, this is a very, like I mentioned, a very sort of high level view of soil health, but these are the four things that there's living roots, minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, and maximizing biodiversity are the four sort of components of soil health that you'll see in a lot of different places. Those are what NRCS promotes. It's what a lot of different soil health education programs promote, is those four pieces. And the fifth piece that's sometimes included is including livestock, which can also be part of the biodiversity, right? So continuous living roots, that can be cover crops, that can be perennial crops, right? Minimizing disturbance, no-till or minimal tillage, and then maximizing soil cover, again, that also fits in with a minimal disturbance type of agriculture. So instead of incorporating all the residue, can we leave residue on the surface of the soil? The longer we can keep the soil covered throughout the year, the healthier it's going to be often, and the longer we can provide living roots. And then maximizing biodiversity. So that comes in with crop rotation, comes in with multi-species cover crops, incorporating livestock, longer, more complex crop rotation. So there are a lot of different factors that fit in here, but these are sort of the basic things that come up in the discussions about soil health and how we maintain healthy systems. And a lot of this really comes down to increasing the amount of carbon in the soil. So getting the carbon into the soil and keeping it there. So continuous living roots, right? That's keeping the photosynthesis process functioning, pulling that carbon out of the air, putting it into the soil, getting that carbon cycling through the soil microbial life there. Again, minimizing disturbance, keeping that carbon once it's in the soil, keeping it there instead of having it volatilize out of the soil and go back and become carbon dioxide again. So a lot of that is, again, comes down to getting the carbon in the soil and keeping it there. Biodiversity, again, getting that carbon there to feed the soil microbes. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about the soil, healthy soil system. We want resilient systems. We want systems that can adapt and self-manage in the face of challenges. And we want systems that get carbon into the soil and keep them there. And really to think about soil health as a spectrum. So there are sort of less healthy systems. Maybe we have higher disease, temperature extremes, compacted soils, bare soils, wind and water erosion, low nutrient availability, a lot of challenges that come with a less healthy system. And the idea is we're trying to move along that spectrum from a less healthy system to a more healthy system, healthier plants, lower input costs, hopefully more profitable farms. That's a really key one. The idea is we have a healthier system, it's more resilient, more productive over the long term, more profitable farms, lower disease pressure, better water holding capacity, better environmental services. That's the goal with soil health. So wherever you are on your farm, look at moving, whatever you can do to sort of move along that spectrum and towards a healthier system. So that's my very high level basic overview of soil health and some of the basic concepts that I hope are helpful to inform further conversations about healthy soils in Wyoming especially, and healthy farms.
Thanks. Jay, are you taking us from here then?
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay, now just to confirm, you see my title slide, right? And not my presenter view? Okay. I went through half the semester showing my students that semester or the presenter view, and nobody said anything. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Caitlin. And that was a great introduction to, I'm just going to talk about this idea and hopefully to get a conversation going. And that parallel with human health, I think, is great. This guy's saying, give it to me straight, doc. How long do I have to ignore your advice? And when I saw this, I thought, you know, I've had farmers ask me things like that. So, and really, you know, a farmer knows a healthy soil when they see it. But there's a lot of things often preventing that good management. And a lot of that good management and healthy soil is in the public interest. So it warrants assistance from public programs. That's why that's a big function of NRCS. So Caitlin already went over this. Some of the functions of healthy soil support sustainable production. So it's in the interest of farmers. Others like environmental protection, wildlife habitat, water quality and quantity, so preventing erosion, things like that, and carbon sequestration. In fact, the soil holds a huge amount of carbon, something like 250 times the annual amount produced by human activities as carbon dioxide. So I like to talk about this with students. A fraction of a percent increase in soil organic matter can completely offset human emissions of carbon dioxide, human-caused emissions. So that's an important function of soil health. I don't want to spend much time on this, but these are the important soil functions, and there's just a lot of indicators of the quality of those functions that have been developed over time. And different indicators support different functions that support different management objectives like production or environmental protection. So a goal would be to sort through all that and tailor it for Wyoming production systems. But the overall goal of this idea is to bring the Wyoming agricultural community together around soil health. And we're talking about croplands and rangelands and forests, and forming a broad partnership across the ag community, including producers, the Farm Bureau, stock growers, Farmers Union, the Wyoming Department of Ag, NRCS, conservation districts, everybody that has an interest. And I hope that a lot of you are thinking of ones that I didn't list here. Helen Silver, like I mentioned, is going to come from the effort in Colorado and talk about that tomorrow. So I steal a lot from their ideas, and I really like their principles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what a Wyoming initiative could look like. Of course, it would develop its own, on its own if we get this going. But the principles I think that have to be involved would be, it has to be producer-centered. It's got to be science-based, and it has to promote voluntary solutions, like incentive-based solutions. Some initial components of a soil health initiative could include a science and practice component, an outreach component, and implementation strategies that would all be interconnected and support each other. Science and practice would include soil health testing, and assessment strategies in Wyoming systems. So like I said, there's a lot of these that have been developed. They need to be tailored for Wyoming. We need to identify the best ones for each of our soils and production systems. And then developing methods of interpreting those. So these range all the way from, like Caitlin's picture, just looking at the soil, you know it when you see it, to sophisticated lab tests that try to predict the amount of nitrogen that's going to be biologically available over the season. Then inventorying soil health across Wyoming. One purpose of that would be to identify benchmark systems where best management practices have created good soil health, and identifying areas with potential for restoration and improving soil health. And then research to develop and assess best management practices for our production systems. That's an ongoing activity that this effort would facilitate and be part of. Then the extension and outreach component, it could involve, I think the first thing it has to do is involve listening sessions that are going to guide the actions of this effort. It could publicize success stories about soil health and facilitate demonstration sites on both farms and on UW research stations, and then other outreach activities, and facilitate the extension efforts we already have going, plus the efforts of other groups, NRCS and others. And then on the ground implementation, part of that would be enhancing the capacity of NRCS and the Department of Ag to provide technical assistance. Developing innovative incentive strategies for things that are going to make people want to adopt soil health management practices. And then bringing some established programs to Wyoming. For example, this Illinois STAR program gives farmers points for each soil management practice they adopt, and it's judged by a scientific advisory committee, and they get a sign to put on their farm. And then this soil health partnership in the Midwest is working with over 200 farms. They sample soils. They have research test strips on farms. It's a nonprofit organization that, and both of these are, the Colorado effort is adopting both of these programs for Colorado. So, and that's as far west as either one of them have gone. So actions, I want to start to meet on a regular basis, and hopefully some of you will contact me to be part of this effort. First thing we need to do is facilitate listening sessions and produce a survey perhaps to find out what producers are already doing, what they'd like to do, and what assistance they feel would really drive adoption of soil health practices. And the second part of those efforts would inform the community that this exists, that we're doing this. And then look for some startup funding from grants and especially from grants. Now just quickly, some other efforts going on in states in the West. This Colorado Collaborative, Helen Silver is going to tell us a lot about that tomorrow, but they have working groups in science and practice, incentives, knowledge sharing, and stakeholder engagement. They've been successful at writing grants to start up, and they're bringing these programs in that I mentioned. And they're also developing legislation to sort of make it a permanent program. The Washington Soil Health Initiative is a strong partnership amongst the Department of Ag, Washington State University, and the State Conservation Commission there. And they, a strong part of theirs is a network of long-term research stations that demonstrate and research soil health management practices for different agricultural systems in Washington. Hawaii has a program, Healthy Soils Hawaii, and this really works closely with the conservation districts there for soil health planning and incentives. And they've been, they've received some funding from the state legislature there for exploratory, to explore that program. California has a really strong program that's kind of centered on carbon sequestration and incentives for that. They fund demonstration projects, they have grants for farmers, a lot of things going on with that program. So these would be some, there's already a lot of ideas out there. There's a lot of others across the whole country, pretty innovative and different ideas. This is from that Healthy Soils Hawaii. They have this soil health baseline score that they're working with a private lab to develop, and then incentivize practices on farms. So that's what I have, and I just would encourage you to join the conversation so we can develop a unique program for Wyoming. I think we have a little time for questions.
We do, yeah. We've got about 6 minutes here before a break, and people can continue the conversation over the break. Want to remind people that we have a whole hour and a half on this tomorrow. I think Mike and some of these crew members will be leading up to say what else could this look like here. I know I've been working with a lot of producers on other projects this year, and when I heard you say voluntary solutions and incentives, I was like, that's going to speak to a lot of people.
Yeah, and we'll have Helen and a producer that is also going to be on with Helen tomorrow that's working with their program. So to give that perspective about why he thinks it's important.
Yeah, appreciate that. So especially want to hear from folks who maybe won't be able to join tomorrow. This is the session from starting at 9:15, which coincides with the Food Freedom Act workshop. So especially if you know that you're going to be in a different group, if you have any feedback or suggestions for this group to keep in mind, knowing that they're really excited about pursuing this, but want it to be kind of producer-centered and kind of maximizing the engagement with it. Any questions or bits of feedback for this group?
I'm just curious, do you have a sense of what the current state of soil is? Do we have any way that we measure even piecemeal? I guess what's the current state of affairs?
Yeah, we know quite a bit about that. I've done research in all the different egg systems in Wyoming, and most soil fertility tests get soil organic matter, so we know what that status is, and we kind of know what it should be. And like everywhere in the world, most of our agricultural soils are degraded and depleted of organic matter. And that really represents an opportunity, because you can't increase organic matter in soil that's got its optimum amount, but you can when it's been degraded. So it represents an opportunity to increase carbon sequestration in these soils, for example.
I see a question in the chat about small garden plots and home gardens and community gardens that I would love to answer. I think there really is an opportunity there for a lot of education and improvement in terms of soil health in gardens. And I've done a fair amount in the Worland area, really encouraging people to switch to a no-till garden methods or heavy mulch, heavy organic matter additions in gardens. And I think in community gardens too, there's a lot of opportunity to reduce inputs and increase the quality of food produced, and particularly with our relatively harsh climates, both with extreme heat in the summer and extreme cold in the winter, and then high wind in certain areas of the state. I think there really is an opportunity to improve soil health, even starting at the garden level, which I think in turn helps people understand the biology, understand the carbon cycles, and understand a lot of what the conversation about healthy soils and healthy food really is when you can apply it at the garden level.
That's right. Caitlin and I both give a lot of presentations every year about soil health in gardening, and there's a lot of interest. You know, there's way more gardeners in Wyoming than there are farmers.
And I think it helps people become better consumers if they can understand sort of the biology of the system and all of that, and how consumption then is connected to that on the farm scale.
Appreciate that connection between the gardeners and then thinking of people as consumers on a broader scale.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For either or both of them, about how many producers in Wyoming do you think are already using soil health practices that you're talking about?
Tiffany Hayes from NRCS will be with us tomorrow, and will provide some numbers about how many farmers they provide incentive money for soil health practices. I work with quite a few that do different practices, cover crops, especially minimum or no tillage, integrating forages into their rotations to feed livestock, but also, you know, a perennial crop and a rotation really improves the soil. And we've measured a lot of those things in both irrigated and dryland systems, and can actually show how much reduced tillage and incorporating longer rotations helps.
I think we have a lot of ranchers that are also really interested in soil health,
That's
both
right.
rangeland soil health and also like in forage-based systems, pasture and hay-based systems. And I've found in my work here in the Bighorn Basin, sometimes it's the ranchers that are actually more excited about it and understand it. And I think it's because they have a little better handle maybe on the biology of the understanding cattle biology, rumen health, sort of the more holistic approach perhaps than some of our crop farmers here in the basin. That is a generalization, but I have noticed that there are a lot of ranchers that get pretty excited about the biodiversity piece of it and the reducing inputs as well. And we have a few farmers here. I suspect between Jay and I, mostly Jay, working with most of the farmers in the state already or know who they are that are really most excited about soil health practices. But I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to really grow that participation and interest and show some examples of how it can benefit producers around the state and catch up. I feel like we're maybe, this is just a guess, Jay, maybe 15 years behind some of the other states in terms of soil health practices with our farmers. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here for sure.
Yeah, good question though, Mike. That's one thing, and an inventory and a survey would help us get a better handle on who those people are that can help us with this effort.
Yeah, appreciate that. So we're just about out of time on this session. I wonder, Jay, you put your email address in your presentation. I wonder if you want to put it in the chat again. And I know folks can get in touch with Mike through the coalition, but just for folks who are really interested in Caitlin, if you'd like to share your contact information there too. Everybody's Googleable, but it's just for folks who are interested, and especially if they can't join tomorrow, to make sure that they can follow up with you all. Appreciate those. Good. Exciting possibilities.